Welcome back to Fate Library. Before we dive into the blood-soaked continuation of Kaelen Vane's epic journey, let's quickly recap exactly where we left off. Our protagonist, Kaelen, was betrayed by the very people he trusted, his own family's retainers, and cast down into the darkest, most terrifying dungeon in the world, the Abyssal Wilds. He was meant to rot there, he was meant to be forgotten. But instead of dying, the intense, corrosive mana of the abyss forced an awakening within him, birthing the Shadow Sovereign. After farming the abyss for years and building an army of unkillable shadow monsters, including his loyal commander Vanguard, Inferno the Fire Drake, Goliath the Calamity Bear, and the newly extracted level 60 Abyssal Colossus, Kaelen clawed his way back to the surface. He absolutely annihilated the traitorous Duke Valerius and his 10,000-strong Ironblood army. Reclaiming his family's territory in a single, brutal night, he hit level 30 and claimed the title of the true sovereign. But his victory was short-lived. The moment he killed the Duke and extracted the Colossus, the Holy Arcanum Empire detected the massive surge of abyssal magic. Now, an unprecedented crusade of 100,000 holy paladins is marching directly on Kaelen's location. The war for the continent has officially begun. But we need to stop for a second and ask a very important question. Why? Why would the Supreme Holy Emperor deploy 100,000 elite paladins? An army large enough to conquer 3 nations, to deal with a single boy who had just reclaimed his own ruined land. On the surface, the Emperor claims it is a holy crusade to purge a heretic who wields forbidden dark magic. But the truth is far darker and infinitely more terrifying. To understand the sheer scale of the Emperor's terror, we have to look back at a secret hidden deep within the forbidden archives of the Holy Capital. A secret about the Vane family bloodline. You see, the Vanes weren't just ordinary nobles guarding the northern border. Every 500 years, a child born into the Vane bloodline is destined to awaken an ancient, unfathomable power. A power so absolute, it threatens the very foundation of the world's power structures. 500 years ago, the last Vane to awaken this power nearly toppled the previous empire before being sealed away by the combined might of 3 continents. The current Holy Emperor, terrified that history would repeat itself and that he would lose his golden throne to a new awakened Vane, orchestrated a massive, secret conspiracy. He didn't just want Kaelen dead. The Emperor had planned to brutally massacre every single living person in the Vane bloodline. Kaelen's family wasn't just accidentally caught in the crossfire of a political betrayal 10 years ago. They were systematically wiped out because of a paranoid tyrant's desperate fear of a 500-year prophecy. And the supreme, beautiful irony of it all, it was this very betrayal, this very massacre that forced Kaelen into the abyss. The Emperor, in his desperate attempt to stop the prophecy, is the exact reason it was fulfilled. He created the very monster he was trying to prevent. But Kaelen doesn't know any of this yet. He doesn't know about the 500-year cycle. He doesn't know the Emperor was the mastermind behind his family's slaughter. All Kaelen knows right now is that there are 100,000 heavily armored lunatics marching toward his newly claimed kingdom. And they want to kill his people and erase his existence. We cut back to the northern border. The dust from the fallen Ironblood Colossus hasn't even settled yet. Kaelen stands on a rocky overlook, his tattered black coat blowing violently in the wind. The sky above is painted a bruised, apocalyptic purple as his abyssal aura slowly seeps into the atmosphere itself, suffocating the natural sunlight. The ground begins to vibrate. At first, it's just a subtle hum against the soles of his boots. But within seconds, it escalates into a violent, rhythmic tremor. Pebbles bounce off the rocks. Kaelen looks to the southern horizon. A literal sea of gold and white is cresting over the distant hills. It is the vanguard of the Holy Crusade. To call it an army would be a gross understatement. It is a tide of divine wrath. Rows upon rows of heavily armored paladins, their white cloaks billowing in the wind, their golden breastplates reflecting the sunlight so fiercely it looks as though a second sun has descended upon the earth. At the forefront of this massive host ride the Grand Templars, level 70 elites mounted on massive, armored griffins that screech into the sky. The air crackles with pure, unadulterated holy energy. It is so dense, so aggressively purifying, that the grass beneath the advancing army instantly turns to white ash. The ambient mana in the region is being forcibly converted into light magic. Kaelen crosses his arms. His eyes, glowing with a frigid necrotic blue fire, scan the incoming tide. He isn't afraid, he isn't even nervous, he is simply calculating. A system prompt suddenly shatters the silence in Kaelen's mind. System alert, extreme divine energy detected. Quest generated, the Crusade of Arcanum. Objective 1, survive the initial assault. Objective 2, decimate the Holy Vanguard. Reward, Shadow Evolution, Tier 2, plus 150000 Shadow Capacity, random Mythic Grade Skill Book. Survive, Kaelen mutters, a dry, humorless chuckle escaping his lips. Even after everything in the abyss, the system is still underestimating me. Next to Kaelen, the shadows on the ground begin to bubble and writhe like boiling tar. Vanguard, his loyal shadow commander, rises from the darkness. The undead knight is clad in pitch-black armor, holding a jagged broadsword that constantly drips with corrosive void energy. "My liege," Vanguard's voice echoes, sounding like grinding stones at the bottom of a well. "Their numbers are overwhelming." The holy aura they project is a natural counter to our lesser shadows. Direct confrontation on an open plain heavily favors their phalanx formation. Shall I order the infantry to fall back to the canyon? Kaelen doesn't take his eyes off the Golden Army. No, if I send the infantry into a retreat, their holy magic will overtake them. We need to break their formation right here. We need to show them that their god has absolutely no jurisdiction in my domain. Kaelen reaches out his right hand. The shadows around his arm coalesce and solidify, forming his signature weapon, the Shadowweave Bow. The weapon hums with dark energy, thirsty for mana. He aims not at the approaching army, but high into the sky above them. "Inferno, Noctis," Kaelen says calmly, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a sovereign. "It's time to eat." From the massive, 70-foot shadow of the Abyssal Colossus, standing like a dormant mountain behind Kaelen, two terrifying entities emerge. The first is Inferno, the level 50 fire drake. It lets out an earth-shattering roar that rattles the teeth of everyone within a 5-mile radius. Its skeletal wings erupt in blazing blue flames as it launches itself into the sky, blotting out the sun. The second is Noctis. This is a shadow we haven't seen in full combat yet. Noctis was an apex predator Kaelen extracted in the deepest, darkest pits of the abyss. It is a massive, six-eyed shadow panther, the size of a siege tank, with razor-sharp tendrils constantly whipping around its lithe body. Noctis doesn't roar. It simply purrs, a sound so deep it shakes the very bedrock, before melting completely into the shadows, becoming invisible to the naked eye. Down on the battlefield, the commander of the Holy Vanguard, a level 75 paladin named Seraphim, raises his glowing golden broadsword. He sits atop an armored warhorse, his face twisted in a snarl of righteous fury. "Halt!" Seraphim bellows, his voice amplified by a localized wind spell. The entire front line of 10,000 paladins comes to a perfectly synchronized stop. The discipline is terrifying. Seraphim stares up at the distant ridge where Kaelen stands alone. "Heretic," Seraphim roars, pointing his glowing blade at Kaelen. "You stand in the presence of the Emperor's divine will. The abyssal filth you have brought to this sacred land will be cleansed in holy fire. Surrender your soul for judgment, and we shall grant you a swift, merciful death." Kaelen lowers his bow for a fraction of a second. He taps his throat, channeling a small fraction of his immense mana pool to amplify his voice. He doesn't yell, he speaks with a chilling calmness. "You brought 100,000 men to my front door," Kaelen's voice booms, rolling across the valley like a physical shockwave of thunder. "And you talk to me about sacred land. This territory was built by the blood of the Vane family. And since I am the only one left, it belongs to me. You are trespassing." Kaelen draws the bowstring back to his ear. The arrow he notches isn't a normal shadow arrow, it is hypercondensed. Kaelen pours massive amounts of his mana into the tip. The space around the arrowhead literally begins to warp and distort, pulling in the ambient light like a miniature black hole. Skill activated, void singularity shot. "Vanguard, shields!" Seraphicus screams, instantly sensing the terrifying, unnatural density of mana gathering on the ridge. His survival instincts, honed over decades of crusades, scream at him. 10,000 paladins simultaneously step forward and slam their heavy golden shields into the earth. Holy Aegis Phalanx, they chant in absolute unison. A massive, impenetrable dome of blinding white light erupts from their shields, linking together to cover the entire front line in a divine barrier. This barrier is a legendary spell designed to withstand the breath of an ancient dragon or a volley of meteor strikes. Kaelen releases the bowstring. The void arrow doesn't just fly, it simply erases the physical space between Kaelen and the barrier. It impacts the massive dome of holy light dead center. For 2 whole seconds, there is absolute silence on the battlefield. The holy barrier ripples furiously, turning from white to gray as it struggles to contain the localized black hole that is Kaelen's arrow. And then, the barrier shatters like fragile glass. The void singularity explodes, creating a localized vacuum that violently rips the air from the paladin's lungs. The shockwave is devastating. It tosses heavily armored, level 50 elite knights into the air like discarded ragdolls. The perfectly synchronized front line is instantly thrown into absolute bloody chaos. Shields shatter, armor buckles. The unbreakable phalanx is broken by a single shot. Now, Kaelen commands, his eyes flashing blue. From high above the clouds, Inferno dives straight down like a blue meteor. The fire drake opens its massive skeletal jaws and unleashes a torrent of necrotic blue fire. The flames wash over a platoon of 1,000 disoriented paladins. Normally, holy armor would resist fire magic, but because the fire is necrotic, it bypasses their physical armor entirely. The paladins scream in unspeakable agony as the blue fire directly scorches their mana cores, instantly sapping their strength and dropping them to their knees. Their bodies turning cold instead of hot. "Hold the line, anti-air mages, bring that beast down," Seraphicus screams, wildly swinging his sword to deflect incoming magical debris. But as the mages raise their staffs to cast at Inferno, the shadows stretching from their own feet begin to twist and distort unnaturally. Noctis, the massive shadow panther, erupts from the shadows directly inside the Holy Vanguard's vulnerable backline. The beast is a blur of pitch-black motion. Its 6 glowing blue eyes leave neon light trails in the air as it moves with impossible, physics-defying speed. With a single, brutal swipe of its massive claws, Noctis decapitates 5 elite mages at once. The razor-sharp tendrils whipping around its body slice through the paladin's golden armor as if it were made of wet paper, severing limbs and shattering formations. The Holy Army, which had been so confident, so pristine and so invincible just minutes ago, is now screaming in sheer terror. They are being attacked from the sky. They are being massacred from within their own shadows, and their impenetrable divine defenses were shattered by a single arrow. Seraphicus, watching his elite troops being slaughtered by mere pets, completely loses his temper. His body erupts in a blinding, aggressive golden aura. He kicks off the ground, leaving a massive crater behind, and launches himself like a missile straight toward the ridge where Kaelen is standing. "I will cut the head off the snake," Seraphicus roars, his broadsword extending into a 30-foot-long blade of pure, concentrated holy light. Divine execution. Kaelen doesn't move, he doesn't step back, he doesn't even draw another arrow. He just stands there, his hands resting in his pockets, watching the glowing level 75 paladin commander flying toward him with a lethal, mountain-cleaving strike. Just as Seraphicus brings the massive blade of light down toward Kaelen's head, Kaelen simply snaps his fingers. A massive hand, made of pitch-black, obsidian steel, reaches out from the ground right in front of Kaelen and casually catches the 30-foot blade of light in its palm. Seraphicus's eyes widen in absolute horror as his momentum is completely and violently stopped. He looks up. Standing between him and Kaelen is the Abyssal Colossus. The 70-foot-tall siege golem, now corrupted and infused with Kaelen's shadow magic, stares down at the tiny paladin commander. The necrotic blue fire burns fiercely in the Colossus's chest core. "You brought a sword to a siege fight," Kaelen says softly, stepping out from behind the massive golem. The Abyssal Colossus closes its massive fist, instantly crushing the blade of divine light into sparkling dust. Then with a casual, almost lazy backhand swing, the Colossus swats Seraphim out of the air. The level 75 commander is sent flying backward at supersonic speed, crashing through his own troops, and carving a trench into the earth for 100 yards before finally coming to a halt in a cloud of dust, completely incapacitated and bleeding heavily. The battlefield goes dead silent again. The remaining paladins of the vanguard stare at the crater where their invincible commander lays broken. They look up at the ridge. Kaelen stands there, flanked by the 70-foot Abyssal Colossus. Inferno circles overhead, painting the sky with blue fire. Noctis prowls through their own ranks, growling menacingly over the corpses of the mages. And behind Kaelen, the shadows of the 10,000 Ironblood soldiers he had killed previously begin to rise from the ground, drawing their dark weapons in perfect unison. Kaelen's eyes glow with terrifying intensity. "You came here to purge a heretic," Kaelen's voice echoes across the valley, cold and merciless. "But all you did was deliver 100,000 fresh soldiers to my doorstep." System command initiated, total annihilation. "Kill them all," Kaelen whispers, "and when they die, extract them." "Kill them all," Kaelen whispered. "And when they die, extract them." The order left his lips not as a shout, but as a chilling, absolute command that reverberated through the very souls of his undead army, and the shadows obeyed. Welcome back to Fate Library, where we are continuing the bloody, relentless saga of Kaelen Vane, the Shadow Sovereign. If you remember the terrifying conclusion of our last chapter, Kaelen had just completely shattered the impenetrable vanguard of the Holy Arcanum Empire's 100,000-strong crusade. Their level 75 commander, Seraphim, was swatted out of the sky like a common insect by Kaelen's newly acquired Abyssal Colossus. Now the true massacre begins. Down in the valley, the remaining members of the vanguard, the 10,000 elite paladins who had formed the front line, were completely paralyzed by fear. These were men and women who had spent their entire lives training in the divine arts. They had purged hundreds of dungeons, vanquished countless demons, and believed themselves to be the absolute pinnacle of human strength. But standing before Kaelen Vane, they were nothing more than helpless children. The 70-foot Abyssal Colossus let out a mechanical, world-shaking roar. The necrotic blue fire blazing within its chest cavity pulsed violently, sending a shockwave of localized freezing temperature across the battlefield. The Colossus didn't even use a weapon. It simply waded into the sea of golden armor, swinging its massive obsidian fists. Every single swing sent dozens of heavily armored paladins flying through the air, their bodies shattered before they even hit the ground. "Form up, reform the phalanx," a desperate vice commander screamed, his voice cracking with panic. He raised his golden shield, trying to channel his holy mana. "The light protects us, do not falter." But his words were immediately cut short, from the pitch-black shadows stretching from the vice commander's own boots. A pair of glowing blue eyes appeared. Noctis, the massive six-eyed shadow panther, materialized instantly. The beast's jaws clamped down on the vice commander's torso, its razor-sharp, void-infused teeth effortlessly biting through the legendary tier breastplate. With a violent toss of its head, Noctis threw the broken paladin aside and seamlessly melted back into the shadows, completely invisible once again. The psychological horror of an apex predator that could strike from any shadow, at any angle, completely broke whatever discipline the vanguard had left. Above them, Inferno, the level 50 fire drake, continued its strafing runs. Instead of breathing fire, the skeletal dragon began casting high-tier abyssal magic. Massive, jagged spikes of black ice rained down from the sky like an artillery barrage, pinning paladins to the earth. And then Kaelen's infantry moved in. The original Ironblood soldiers, the very army Kaelen had decimated and resurrected the night before, charged forward. They still wore their original armor, but their eyes glowed with Kaelen's blue fire. Because they were undead, they felt no fatigue, no pain, and absolutely no fear. If a paladin managed to cut off a shadow soldier's arm, the shadow would simply reattach it with dark smoke and continue swinging. It was a battle of attrition that the humans had no mathematical chance of winning. Kaelen watched the slaughter from the ridge, his face completely devoid of emotion. To him, this wasn't a war. This was simply a harvest. System alert, Holy Vanguard casualties have reached 90%. Quest Objective 1, survive the initial assault complete. Vanguard, Kaelen said softly, addressing his armored shadow commander standing silently beside him. Yes, my liege, the undead knight replied, bowing deeply. They are breaking, Kaelen noted. Watching the rear ranks of the Vanguard drop their weapons and turn to flee toward the main body of the crusade. Don't let a single one of them cross that valley line. Encircle them. Your will is absolute, Vanguard responded. The shadow commander raised his jagged, corrosive broadsword toward the sky. He didn't shout. He communicated through the hive mind of the shadow army. Instantly, thousands of shadow beasts, void wolves, abyssal crawlers, and dark assassins burst from the ground in a wide perimeter, completely cutting off the Vanguard's retreat. The trap was sealed. Within 10 minutes it was over. The pride of the Holy Arcanum Empire, the impenetrable Vanguard, was completely eradicated. 10,000 elite paladins lay dead in the mud. The remaining 90,000 troops of the Holy Crusade, positioned on the far hills, watched in absolute, soul-crushing horror. They hadn't even had time to send reinforcements. Their strongest, most disciplined unit was just wiped off the map by a single teenager and his pets. Kaelen slowly walked down from the ridge, his boots lightly touching the blood-soaked earth. He walked past the towering abyssal colossus, past the purring Noctis, and stepped directly into the center of the massacre. The remaining 90,000 paladins on the distant hills held their breath. They watched through their spyglasses and magical scrying orbs. What was the heretic doing? Kaelen stopped in the center of the valley. He slowly raised both of his hands, his palms facing the sky. The ambient mana in the air grew so thick and heavy that it became difficult for anyone within a 10-mile radius to breathe. The sky above turned from bruised purple to an absolute pitch-black void. "Arise," Kaelen commanded. System command initiated, mass shadow extraction. The earth itself seemed to groan in agony. Black, smoky tendrils erupted from the corpses of the 10,000 fallen paladins. The holy energy that had once resided in their bodies was violently purged. Replaced by Kaelen's dense, necrotic mana, one by one the fallen knights began to stand back up. But they were no longer the pristine, golden defenders of the Emperor. Their armor had turned a corrupted, metallic black. Their holy white cloaks were now tattered ribbons of shadow, and beneath their visors, their eyes burned with Kaelen's signature blue flame. Up on the hills, the remaining 90,000 troops of the Holy Crusade began to scream. "By the gods!" a commanding officer gasped, falling to his knees. As he watched his own brother, who had died just minutes ago in the Vanguard, rise from the dirt as an undead slave. He's resurrecting them. He's stealing their souls. The psychological damage was immeasurable. The Holy Arcanum Empire preached that death in service of the Emperor guaranteed a place in the glorious afterlife. But Kaelen was proving their religion was a lie. There was no afterlife here. There was only Kaelen's army. System alert, mass extraction successful. Acquired 10,000 Shadow Paladins, LV 4060. Quest Objective 2, decimate the Holy Vanguard complete. Quest complete, the Crusade of Arcanum Part 1. Kaelen lowered his hands, a satisfied smirk crossing his face as he looked at the massive blue system window floating in front of him. He loved the sound of those notifications. Calculating rewards. Reward 1. Shadow capacity increased by +150,000. Reward 2. Shadow Evolution Tier 2 unlocked. Reward 3. Random Mythic Grade Skill Book awarded. Apply the Tier 2 Evolution immediately, Kaelen muttered to the system. Shadow Evolution Tier 2 applied. All infantry class shadows have been promoted to elite class. All elite class shadows have been promoted to knight class. Commander Vanguard has evolved into Abyssal Warlord Vanguard. Kaelen watched in awe as Vanguard, his loyal right-hand knight, began to physically change. The commander's armor grew thicker, adorned with jagged, crown-like spikes. A massive, tattered black cape materialized from his shoulders, and his broadsword transformed into a terrifying, two-handed executioner's greatsword that constantly emitted a low-frequency hum of destructive void energy. Vanguard wasn't just a commander anymore, he was a walking disaster equivalent to an S-rank hunter. "And now, for the grand prize," Kaelen whispered, opening his inventory and pulling out a glowing, leather-bound book that radiated an intense, ancient pressure. "Item Mythic Grade Skill Book Random. Use it," Kaelen commanded. The book shattered into a million particles of dark starlight, flowing directly into Kaelen's chest. The sheer volume of information and magical theory forced into his brain almost made him stagger. He closed his eyes, gritting his teeth as the system integrated the new ability into his mana core. New skill acquired, Domain of the Underworld, Mythic Grade. Description: the Sovereign may manifest a localized reality marble of the Underworld. Cooldown: 7 days. Duration: 1 hour. Kaelen slowly opened his eyes. The blue fire within them flared intensely. "Domain of the Underworld," he repeated, tasting the words. "A reality marble that practically grants me godhood for a full hour. This emperor really has no idea what he's awakened." We cut away from the blood-soaked valley and travel hundreds of miles south, deep into the heart of the Holy Arcanum Empire. We enter the Grand Basilica, the absolute center of power for the continent. The architecture is impossible, towering pillars of solid gold. Stained glass windows depicting angels descending from the heavens, and a ceiling that seems to stretch into infinity, glowing with a manufactured, artificial sunlight. Sitting upon a massive throne carved from the bones of ancient holy beasts is the Supreme Holy Emperor, Aurelius. He is a man who looks to be in his late 30s, impossibly handsome, radiating an aura of absolute divine authority. He wears a crown of floating, glowing halos, but right now the Emperor does not look divine, he looks terrified. The heavy golden doors of the throne room blast open. A high-ranking teleportation mage stumbles in, his robes scorched and his face pale as death. The mage falls to his knees on the polished marble floor, gasping for air. "Your Holiness!" the mage cries out, his voice trembling so violently he can barely form words. A report from the Northern Vanguard." Emperor Aurelius leans forward, his golden eyes narrowing. "Speak, did Seraphicus secure the heretic's head?" "The Vanguard is gone, Your Holiness," the mage whispers, tears streaming down his face. "All 10,000 wiped out in less than 20 minutes. The heretic, he possesses an army of monsters, and he resurrected our fallen knights. He turned them into dark slaves. Commander Seraphicus was swatted out of the sky by a giant golem made of shadows. The silence in the throne room is deafening. The elite royal guards flanking the throne exchange nervous glances. The emperor slowly stands up. He doesn't yell. He doesn't execute the messenger. He just stares blankly at the stained glass window depicting an angel slaying a demon. "So, it is true," the emperor whispers to himself, his voice barely audible. "The 500-year cycle wasn't broken. The massacre, the purge of the Vane territory, it failed." The emperor begins to pace, his perfectly manicured fingernails digging into his palms until they draw blood. We dive deep into his internal monologue. 500 years ago, the first Shadow Sovereign nearly destroyed this entire continent. It took the combined sacrifice of 6 constellations to seal him away. The prophecy stated that the bloodline would awaken again. That is why I ordered the Vane family to be slaughtered. I ordered every man, woman, and child with a drop of that cursed blood to be burned alive in the middle of the night. How did one survive? How did he awaken the power? The Emperor's mind races with absolute paranoia. If the public finds out that the heretic in the north is actually the prophesied disaster, panic will ensue. If the other nations find out, they will withdraw their support. He would lose his throne, his empire, his godhood. "Your Holiness," the trembling mage asks. "The remaining 90,000 troops have halted their advance. They are requesting orders. Should they retreat and fortify the capital?" "No," the Emperor snaps, his golden aura flaring violently, cracking the marble floor beneath his feet. "If we show weakness, the beast will only push forward. We must crush him before his army grows any larger." The Emperor turns to his royal commander, a towering man completely encased in platinum armor. "Unlock the forbidden vaults beneath the basilica. Awaken the Seraphim, the artificial angels we have been building in secret." The royal commander gasps, stepping back. "Your Holiness, the Seraphim consume human souls to function." If we unleash them, the collateral damage to our own troops. I don't care, the Emperor screams, finally losing his divine composure. Feed them the prisoners, feed them the peasants. I want Kaelen Vane's head brought to me on a spike, no matter the cost. Do you understand me? Back in the Valley of Broken Bones, the sky is still completely black, choked by Kaelen's immense mana. Kaelen stands at the head of his newly reinforced army. 10,000 original shadow beasts, 3,000 defectors. And now, 10,000 heavily armored shadow paladins, their blue eyes piercing the darkness. He looks out toward the distant hills, where the remaining 90,000 troops of the Holy Crusade are frantically trying to form defensive lines. Terrified that the monster will charge, Kaelen reaches out and gently pats the massive, armored leg of the Abyssal Colossus. He looks over his shoulder at Warlord Vanguard, who is resting his massive executioner's sword on his shoulder. They're terrified, Kaelen notes, a cold, predatory smile creeping across his face. The Emperor thought he could wipe out my bloodline to save his throne. He thought he could play God. Let's go show him exactly what a real god looks like. Kaelen points his shadowy bow directly toward the southern horizon, toward the heart of the Holy Empire. March, Kaelen commands. And with that single word, the massive, undead army begins to move forward. The earth shakes with the synchronized footsteps of 20,000 unkillable monsters. The fire drake screams in the sky. The shadow panther prowls in the flanks. The Shadow Sovereign has officially declared war on the world. And nothing, not an emperor, not a crusade, and certainly not artificial angels, is going to stand in his way. And that is where we will end Chapter 2. The Vanguard is dead, the Emperor is absolutely terrified, and Kaelen's march on the Holy Capital has officially begun. There is an old proverb in the Holy Arcanum Empire, the narrator begins, the voice deep and resonant. It states that as long as the light shines, the darkness can never truly advance. For hundreds of years, the citizens of the Empire believed this to be an absolute, undeniable fact. They believed their walls were impenetrable. They believed their emperor was divine. They believed they were safe. But proverbs mean absolutely nothing when a literal god of death is knocking on your front door. Welcome back to the blood-soaked journey of Kaelen Vane, the Shadow Sovereign. If you're just tuning in after the massacre in the Valley of Broken Bones, you missed one hell of a slaughter. Kaelen completely wiped out the 10,000 elite paladins of the Vanguard, extracted their souls to turn them into his own undead slaves, and leveled up his entire army. Now, with a combined force of 30,000 unkillable shadow monsters, Kaelen is marching directly south. His target isn't just a random village or a minor outpost. His target is the Bastion of Light, the first major fortress city of the Holy Empire. A massive military stronghold that stands between the northern territories and the Holy Capital. Inside the Bastion of Light, the atmosphere is suffocating. The city is heavily fortified, surrounded by walls made of enchanted white marble that stretch 200 feet into the sky. Ballistas loaded with holy infused bolts line the parapets. 70,000 paladins, the remnants of the crusade that had been sent to kill Kaelen, are crammed inside the fortress, frantically preparing for a siege. But morale is non-existent. These soldiers watch the Vanguard, their strongest, most disciplined unit, get completely erased from existence in less than 20 minutes. They watch their fallen brothers rise from the dirt as shadow slaves. The terror is palpable. It hangs in the air like a thick fog. Standing atop the highest watchtower is General Malachar, a level 80 holy knight tasked with defending the bastion. He stares out through a high-powered magical telescope, looking at the northern horizon. His hands are physically shaking. "General," a young lieutenant stammers, stepping onto the watchtower. The scouts have returned. The heretics' army is exactly 3 miles away. They are not stopping. They haven't even slowed down to set up a siege camp. Malachar slowly lowers the telescope. His face is pale, completely drained of blood. "Why would they set up a camp?" he whispers, his voice hollow. "They don't need to sleep, they don't need to eat, they don't feel fatigue." "We aren't fighting an army, Lieutenant. We are fighting a force of nature." Malachar turns to look over his men on the walls. "Tell the mages to activate the Grand Aegis Barrier. Power it with every single mana crystal we have in the reserves." If that barrier falls, the city falls with it. A gigantic, translucent dome of golden light erupts from the center of the city, expanding outward until it covers the entire fortress. It is the Grand Aegis, a legendary defensive spell designed to withstand continuous bombardment from high-tier magic. As the Golden Dome solidifies, a brief wave of relief washes over the defending paladins. The light is protecting them, but then the sky begins to change. The bright midday sun is slowly choked out by thick, rolling black clouds that seem to bleed out from the northern horizon. The temperature plummets instantly. The golden light of the Aegis barrier is violently contrasted by the sheer, overwhelming darkness that is rolling toward them like a tidal wave. Through the unnatural darkness, the shadow army appears. It is a sight that would break the mind of a lesser man. 30,000 pitch-black soldiers, their eyes burning with necrotic blue fire, marching in absolute, terrifying unison. Above them, Inferno, the massive skeletal fire drake, circles lazily in the black clouds. And at the very front of the army, walking casually with his hands in the pockets of his tattered black coat, is Kaelen Vane. Flanking him is the towering, 70-foot abyssal colossus, its massive obsidian feet shaking the earth with every step. Kaelen stops exactly 100 yards from the golden Aegis barrier. The entire shadow army stops with him, completely freezing in place. The silence that follows is more terrifying than the marching. Up on the walls, the 70,000 paladins grip their weapons, their knuckles turning white, sweating profusely despite the freezing temperature. Kaelen looks up at the massive golden dome. He doesn't look impressed. He looks bored. Now, before Kaelen absolutely shatters this impenetrable barrier and unleashes the most one-sided siege in the history of this world, I need you to do something for me. If you are enjoying this massive, brutal journey of the Shadow Sovereign, you absolutely must destroy that like button down below. It takes 2 seconds, and it tells the YouTube algorithm that you want more epic progression fantasy stories just like this one. Make sure you subscribe to Fate Library and hit that notification bell, because we are dropping massive, full-length recap videos every single week, and you do not want to miss the climax of this war. And finally, leave a comment down below telling me what your absolute favorite shadow monster is so far. Is it Vanguard, Inferno, Noctis, or the new Abyssal Colossus? Let me know. Alright, you've hit the buttons. Now let's get back to the absolute carnage. Kaelen slowly pulls his right hand out of his pocket. The air around him instantly grows so heavy that the ground literally begins to crack under the pressure of his raw mana output. They hid behind a dome of light, Kaelen mutters to himself, a twisted smirk forming on his lips. How predictable. Let's show them what happens when you turn off the sun. Skill activated, domain of the underworld, mythic grade. Kaelen snaps his fingers. The reality around the bastion of light simply shatters. There is no explosion. There is no blinding flash of magic. The physical world just warps. The green grass, the dirt, the rocks, everything within a 10-mile radius is instantly replaced by a bleak, desolate wasteland of jagged obsidian and rivers of flowing, necrotic blue fire. The sky above is completely erased, replaced by a swirling vortex of trapped, screaming souls. Inside the fortress, absolute chaos erupts. The paladins scream in terror as the air itself becomes toxic. You are currently inside the domain of the underworld. All enemies suffer. Minus 70% movement speed, continuous necrotic decay, and absolute terror status effect. All allied shadows gain, plus 300% to all stats, infinite mana regeneration. The golden Aegis barrier, which was supposed to be impenetrable, begins to violently hiss and steam. The sheer ambient concentration of abyssal magic in the domain is actively eating away at the holy magic. The barrier doesn't even need to be attacked. It is literally dissolving just by existing in Kaelen's presence. General Malekar watches in complete horror from the watchtower as the golden dome starts to crack. It's impossible, he stammers, dropping his telescope. He altered reality. He dragged our entire city into hell. Vanguard, Kaelen commands, his voice echoing from every direction at once within the domain. Yes, my liege, the massive abyssal warlord roars, his executioner's greatsword igniting with blue fire. Bring down that wall, Kaelen orders, pointing casually at the 200-foot marble fortifications. Vanguard doesn't march forward. Because of the plus 300% stat boost from the domain, the Warlord moves at a speed that breaks the sound barrier. In less than a second, Vanguard crosses the 100-yard gap. The Aegis barrier has thinned out so much that Vanguard's sword simply slices right through it like a hot knife through butter. The Warlord slams into the massive, enchanted marble wall of the fortress. He swings his greatsword horizontally with the force of a falling meteor. The impenetrable wall of the Bastion of Light, a structure that had stood for 500 years, is completely obliterated in a single strike. A massive 50-yard breach is opened instantly, sending massive chunks of debris flying into the city and crushing hundreds of defending paladins. Charge, Kaelen whispers. The shadow army floods through the breach like a tidal wave of pitch-black water. 30,000 super-buffed, infinitely regenerating undead monsters pour into the streets of the fortress city. The paladins try to fight back. They form shield walls, they cast holy fire, they swing their legendary swords, but it is completely useless. The minus 70% movement speed debuff makes the paladins look like they are fighting underwater. Their swings are painfully slow. The shadow soldiers simply step around their attacks and mercilessly slaughter them. And worse, the necrotic decay of the domain is constantly draining the paladins' health and stamina. They are dying just by breathing the air. Up in the sky, Inferno swoops down, completely ignoring the ballista bolts that bounce harmlessly off its skeletal armor. The Drake unleashes a continuous stream of blue fire, scorching the inner barracks and melting the defensive towers into slag. General Malachar draws his sword, realizing the city is already lost. He prepares to order a full retreat to save whatever men he can. But before he can even open his mouth, the sky above the swirling vortex of souls suddenly rips open. A blinding, pure white light slices through the darkness of Kaelen's domain. It is so bright, so intense, that even Kaelen has to narrow his eyes. From the tier in the sky, they descend. They don't look human. They are towering, 10-foot-tall humanoids made of pure, liquid gold, clad in platinum armor. They have no faces, only a glowing white cross where their features should be. From their backs extend 6 massive wings made of hardened, razor-sharp light. There are only 12 of them, but the sheer, crushing pressure they emit is on par with a constellation's avatar. The Seraphim, General Malachar gasps, falling to his knees. The Emperor actually unleashed them, the artificial angels. Kaelen watches as the 12 Seraphim land in the center of the city. The moment their feet touch the ground, a shockwave of holy energy blasts outward, actually pushing back the shadow army and clearing a large circle in the middle of the chaotic battlefield. Warning, Mythic-Tier entities detected. Entity name, Seraphim Artificial Divine Construct, LV, 85. Danger level, extreme. One of the Seraphim raises its hand. A massive, glowing javelin of light materializes in its palm. Without a sound, the angel throws the javelin directly at Goliath. The massive calamity bears shadow that was currently tearing through a platoon of paladins. The javelin hits Goliath dead in the chest. When the light fades, Goliath is completely gone, erased. And for the first time since Kaelen awakened his powers, the shadow doesn't regenerate. The system prompt confirms it. Shadow Goliath has been permanently destroyed. Kaelen stops walking. The arrogant, bored smirk completely vanishes from his face. His eyes narrow, the blue fire within them burning so intensely it looks almost white. Permanently destroyed, Kaelen whispers, his voice dropping an octave. He looks at the 12 Seraphim. They stand in perfect formation, their faceless heads turning simultaneously to lock onto Kaelen. They are completely unaffected by the domain's debuffs. They are weapons of mass destruction, powered by thousands of human sacrifices, sent by the Emperor to do the impossible. Vanguard steps in front of Kaelen, raising his greatsword, ready to sacrifice himself to protect his sovereign. "Stand down, Vanguard," Kaelen commands, his voice dangerously quiet. Kaelen slowly steps past his commander. He reaches into the void and pulls out his 2 forged iron daggers. Their blades instantly coated in dense, dripping shadow magic. The air around him starts to warp, screaming as he forcibly compresses massive amounts of mana into his own physical body. "They broke my bear," Kaelen says, his eyes locked onto the lead Seraphim. He doesn't teleport, he doesn't cast a spell. Kaelen simply kicks off the ground with so much physical force that the earth shatters into a crater 50 feet wide. He crosses the battlefield in a microsecond, appearing directly in front of the lead Seraphim. The artificial angel tries to react, raising a shield of light. But Kaelen is already moving. Kaelen swings his daggers with terrifying precision. The first strike shatters the shield of light. The second strike severs the angel's right arm. The third strike drives both daggers directly into the glowing white cross on the Seraphim's faceless head. "You think you're divine," Kaelen snarls, channeling his necrotic fire directly into the angel's core. The level 85 Mythic-Tier entity convulses violently before exploding into a shower of golden dust and screaming souls. Kaelen lands gracefully amidst the falling golden particles, slowly turning to face the remaining 11 Seraphim. "I am the sovereign of the underworld," Kaelen states, his voice echoing across the silent battlefield. "And in my domain, even angels bleed." And that is where we are ending Chapter 3. The siege of the Bastion of Light is in full swing, and Kaelen is about to go head-to-head with the Emperor's ultimate weapons. "I am the sovereign of the underworld, and in my domain even angels bleed." The words hung in the toxic, freezing air of the Bastion of Light, carrying a weight that defied the laws of physics. Kaelen Vane stood completely still amidst a shower of glowing, golden dust. That dust was all that remained of a level 85 Mythic-Tier artificial angel. He had dismantled it in less than a second, using nothing but raw speed, physical strength, and a pair of forged iron daggers dripping with necrotic void energy. Welcome back to Fate Library. If you are just tuning in, Kaelen's full-scale invasion of the Holy Arcanum Empire is currently tearing the continent apart. The impenetrable golden Aegis barrier was shattered by Kaelen's newly acquired mythic skill, Domain of the Underworld, which literally transformed the massive fortress city into a hellish wasteland of obsidian and blue fire. General Malaker's 70,000 defending paladins were being utterly routed. But Emperor Aurelius, desperate and paranoid, had unleashed his ultimate trump card, the Seraphim. 12 artificial, faceless angels, powered by the sacrificed souls of thousands of human peasants. They had descended from the sky, instantly permanently destroying Goliath the Calamity Bear, and exuded an aura so terrifying that even Kaelen's elite shadow infantry were forced back. But Kaelen didn't retreat. He didn't order his army to swarm them. He took it personally. We cut back to the present. There are 11 Seraphim remaining. For a brief, unnatural moment, the artificial angels simply stared at the falling golden dust of their fallen brother. Their hive-mind processing cores, located deep within their chests, were trying to calculate what had just happened. A mere human, had moved faster than their divine perception could track. Warning, hostile entities are synchronizing. Warning, incoming Mythic-Tier magical assault. The 11 Seraphim didn't roar, they didn't speak. They simply reacted in perfect, terrifying unison. 6 of the angels instantly took to the sky, their massive, razor-sharp wings of hardened light beating against the heavy abyssal air. The remaining 5 spread out in a perfect pentagram formation around Kaelen. "Vanguard, Inferno." "Keep the paladins away from this sector," Kaelen barked, not taking his eyes off the angels surrounding him. "These 11 belong strictly to me." The 5 grounded Seraphim moved first. They didn't run. They glided across the obsidian ground, their platinum armor leaving glowing trails of light. They simultaneously summoned massive, two-handed halberds made of condensed holy fire. They swung at Kaelen from 5 different blind spots, executing a flawlessly coordinated strike designed to instantly vaporize him. But they were fighting the Shadow Sovereign inside his own reality marble. Domain of the Underworld buff active, plus 300% to all physical stats. Kaelen didn't dodge, he parried. He spun like a top, his twin daggers becoming a blur of black and blue steel. He deflected the first 2 halberds, the impact sending out a shockwave that shattered the windows of the fortress barracks a mile away. He ducked under the 3rd strike, sidestepped the 4th, and caught the shaft of the 5th halberd under his armpit. The angel wielding the 5th halberd paused, its faceless head tilting slightly in mechanical confusion. "Too slow," Kaelen whispered. He channeled his necrotic fire down his arm and directly into the halberd. The blue flames raced up the weapon of light, instantly corrupting the holy energy. When the flames reached the angel's platinum gauntlets, they exploded. The Seraphim's hands were completely blown off. Before the angel could retreat, Kaelen lunged forward, driving his right dagger straight through the angel's chest plate and into its glowing core. Mythic-Tier entity destroyed, 10 left, but the angels in the sky weren't just watching. While Kaelen was executing their grounded brother, the 6 airborne Seraphim had finished chanting a combined spell. "Divine Judgment, Spear of Longinus," a synthesized, harmonic voice echoed from the sky. A massive golden spear, at least 50 feet long and dripping with pure, unadulterated holy wrath, materialized above Kaelen. It wasn't just a physical attack. It was a conceptual weapon designed to pin a target's soul to the earth and burn it for eternity. The spear dropped at terminal velocity, aimed directly at the top of Kaelen's head. "My liege," Vanguard roared from across the battlefield, desperately trying to break off his engagement with the paladins to block the attack. But Kaelen simply looked up. Abyssal swap. In a fraction of a millisecond, Kaelen swapped places with a chunk of debris sitting on a rooftop 200 yards away. The Spear of Longinus slammed into the obsidian ground exactly where Kaelen had been standing. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. A dome of holy fire 100 yards wide erupted, vaporizing the 4 remaining grounded Seraphim who were caught in the blast radius of their own comrade's spell. The 6 airborne angels hovered above the smoking crater, their cross-shaped visors scanning the dust for a body. "Looking for someone?" Kaelen's voice whispered right behind them. The angels spun around in midair. Kaelen wasn't on the ground. He was standing on the back of Inferno, his massive level 50 fire drake, which had silently flown up into the black clouds under the cover of the explosion. Kaelen didn't give them a chance to cast another spell. He jumped off the back of the skeletal dragon, entering a freefall directly toward the cluster of 6 angels. As he fell, the shadows stretching from his own body expanded, forming massive ethereal chains. Skill activated, Chains of the Damned. 6 thick chains of pure void energy shot out from Kaelen's back, wrapping tightly around the ankles of the hovering Seraphim. The angels struggled, flapping their wings of light frantically, but the chains were anchored to the domain itself. "Gravity," Kaelen said coldly, yanking the chains downward with all of his plus 300% strength. The 6 Mythic-Tier angels were violently ripped out of the sky. They crashed into the obsidian earth with bone-shattering force, creating 6 massive craters. Before they could even attempt to stand up, the massive 70-foot abyssal colossus stepped forward. The shadow golem didn't hesitate. It raised its massive foot and brought it down like a hydraulic press, flattening 3 of the fallen angels into golden pancakes in a single, brutal stomp. 3 left. The remaining 3 Seraphim managed to pull themselves out of their craters. Their platinum armor was heavily dented. One was missing a wing. Another's glowing cross visor was cracked. Their hive-mind intelligence had finally reached a terrifying conclusion. They could not win this fight through conventional combat. The Shadow Sovereign was an anomaly that their programming could not overcome. So they resorted to their final directive. The 3 angels stumbled toward each other, grabbing hands. Their bodies began to glow with a blinding, unstable white light. The ambient mana in the air around them started to violently compress. It was a suicide protocol. Warning, Mythic-Tier entities initiating core detonation. Warning, estimated blast radius 50 miles. Warning, this explosion will eradicate the Bastion of Light, your entire shadow army, and potentially yourself. Up on the ruined walls, General Malachar watched in absolute horror. "They're going to blow up the entire city," he whispered, falling to his knees. "The Emperor. He sent them here to wipe us all out just to ensure the heretic dies." The sheer betrayal broke the general's spirit completely. Kaelen landed gracefully on the obsidian ground about 50 yards away from the glowing, self-destructing angels. He didn't run, he didn't panic. He just stared at them with a look of absolute boredom. "A 50-mile blast radius," Kaelen muttered. "Impressive, but you seem to be forgetting whose house you're standing in." The light radiating from the three angels was now so bright it was burning the retinas of the paladins, still fighting on the outskirts of the city. The detonation was exactly 3 seconds away. Kaelen slowly raised his right hand, his palm facing the angels. Domain override, absolute suppression. The domain of the underworld didn't just buff stats, it was a reality marble. It was a pocket dimension where Kaelen's word was absolute law. The obsidian ground beneath the three glowing angels suddenly liquefied, turning into a massive whirlpool of pitch-black shadow. Before the angels could detonate, the whirlpool violently swallowed them whole, dragging them deep into the abyss of Kaelen's pocket dimension. The 50-mile explosion didn't happen. Instead, the ground simply vibrated for a few seconds. Kaelen had teleported the detonation deep into the infinite void of his domain, completely smothering the blast. The silence that followed was absolute. The battle was over. Kaelen stood alone in the center of the ruined bastion of light. The golden Aegis barrier was gone. The grand marble walls were shattered. The Emperor's ultimate weapons, the Seraphim, were entirely eradicated. General Malachar, his spirit completely broken, dropped his sword. The clatter of metal against obsidian echoed loudly. Seeing their general surrender, the remaining 30,000 paladins of the Holy Arcanum Empire did the same. They fell to their knees, weeping openly, realizing that their emperor had been willing to sacrifice all of them just to kill one man. Kaelen didn't immediately execute them. He walked over to the crater where the first angel he had killed lay, scattered in golden dust. The emperor thought he could use artificial divinity against me, Kaelen whispered. Let's show him what real divinity looks like. Arise. System command initiated, shadow extraction. The golden dust scattered across the battlefield began to violently swirl, mixing with the dense, black mana of the domain. The particles of light were corrupted, turning a deep, sickly purple. Slowly, a new figure began to form from the dust. It was a Seraphim, but its platinum armor was now pitch black. Its wings of light were replaced by 6 massive wings made of jagged, solid shadow. And its faceless visor now burned with a single, horizontal slit of necrotic blue fire. Extraction successful. Acquired, Fallen Seraphim, LV, 85 Mythic-Tier Commander, Kaelen smiled. He walked over to the other craters, extracting the remaining flattened angels. Within minutes, he had 6 level 85 Fallen Seraphim hovering silently behind him, their dark wings beating in perfect synchronization. He had just acquired 6 Mythic-Tier commanders. His army was no longer just an overwhelming swarm. It was now a force capable of toppling gods. We cut back to the holy capital, deep inside the Grand Basilica. Emperor Aurelius is standing by the massive scrying pool in the center of his throne room. The pool, which had been broadcasting the magical signatures of the Seraphim, suddenly goes completely dark. The emperor stumbles backward, tripping over the hem of his golden robes. He lands hard on the marble floor. His perfectly manicured hands are shaking uncontrollably. They failed, the emperor gasps, his golden eyes wide with unadulterated terror. The Seraphim, the ultimate weapons, he killed them all. The royal commander, standing nervously by the door, swallows hard. Your Holiness, General Malachar has surrendered the Bastion of Light. The surviving 30,000 paladins have defected, the heretic, Kaelen Vane. He is incorporating the Seraphim into his undead army. The emperor scrambles to his feet, screaming like a madman. Fortify the capital. Recall every single holy knight, every mage, every mercenary guild. I want the city walls lined with absolute defense. If he reaches the basilica, if he steps foot in this throne room, the empire is dead. We dive into the emperor's internal thoughts one last time. He is no longer thinking like a god. He is thinking like cornered prey. He doesn't know, he can't know. If he knew that I was the one who ordered the massacre of his family to stop the 500-year prophecy. He wouldn't just kill me. He would torture my soul for eternity. I have to stop him here. I have to. Kaelen is mounted on the back of Inferno. His army, now swollen to over 70,000 troops, including 6 fallen Seraphim, stretches out as far as the eye can see. The sky above them is permanently stained a bruised, violent purple. Kaelen looks toward the southern horizon. He can't see the holy capital from here, but he can feel it. He can feel the desperation radiating from the Emperor's throne. "We don't stop," Kaelen announces, his voice magically amplified to reach every single soldier in his massive army. "We don't rest. We march until we tear the golden doors off the Emperor's throne room." He points his forged iron dagger south. "March on the capital." And that is where we will brutally end Chapter 4. The Bastion of Light has fallen. Kaelen has acquired Mythic-Tier angels for his shadow army, and the final march to the holy capital has officially begun. The Emperor is cornered, and the 500-year prophecy is knocking on his front door. The throne of lies and the sovereign's wrath. The grand bells of the holy capital had not tolled in a state of emergency for over 400 years. The citizens of the Arcanum Empire believed their city to be the literal center of the universe, a divine sanctuary touched by the gods themselves, surrounded by an impregnable wall of platinum and white marble that stood 300 feet tall. But as the heavy bells violently shook the city, the citizens weren't looking up at the gods. They were looking at the northern horizon, where the sky had turned a bruised, sickening purple. The sun had been completely choked out by a rolling, unnatural fog of pitch-black mana. Welcome back to Fate Library, and strap yourselves in, because we have officially reached the climax of this war. In our last chapter, Kaelen Vane did the impossible. He didn't just defeat the Emperor's ultimate mythic-tier weapons, the Seraphim, he completely absorbed them. Now, flanked by 6 fallen angels, a massive abyssal colossus, and an army of 70,000 undead monsters, Kaelen has arrived at the gates of the holy capital. Up on the platinum walls of the capital, the royal guard stood in absolute, pants-sweating terror. These were level 70 and 80 elites, the absolute best the Empire had to offer. But as they looked down at the valley below, their legendary weapons shook in their hands. Kaelen's army didn't look like a military force anymore. It looked like a natural disaster. The 70,000 shadow soldiers stood in perfect, eerie silence, their blue eyes piercing through the dark fog. The 6 fallen Seraphim hovered directly above Kaelen, their 6 jagged shadow wings beating slowly, radiating an aura of oppressive, suffocating dread that made it physically difficult for the royal guards to breathe. Kaelen stepped forward, his tattered black coat billowing in the chaotic wind. He looked up at the 300-foot platinum wall. He didn't draw his bow, he didn't summon his daggers, he just looked at the abyssal colossus. "Knock," Kaelen commanded. The 70-foot-tall shadow golem pulled its obsidian fist back and punched the platinum wall with the force of a localized meteor strike. The enchantments on the wall, designed to withstand armies, shattered like fragile glass. A massive, gaping hole, 100 feet wide, was instantly blown through the city's primary defense. "Secure the perimeter," Kaelen ordered, his voice amplified by mana echoing across the entire capital. "If anyone in a golden uniform raises a weapon, kill them. If they surrender, ignore them. The citizens are not to be touched. This city is not my enemy." Kaelen's eyes locked onto the towering Grand Basilica in the very center of the city, a massive cathedral made of solid gold that served as the Emperor's palace. "The Emperor belongs to me," Kaelen whispered, his voice turning cold and venomous. Deep inside the Grand Basilica, Emperor Aurelius was losing his mind. The Golden Throne Room, usually filled with hundreds of sycophants, nobles, and holy officials, was completely empty. Everyone had fled. The only people left were the Emperor and his 10 personal Praetorian guards, level 85 holy knights wearing armor forged from the scales of a celestial dragon. The Emperor was pacing wildly in front of his throne, his golden crown sitting askew on his head. "Hold the doors," the Emperor shrieked, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at the massive, 50-foot-tall adamantine doors of the throne room. "If he gets in here, I will execute every single one of you myself." The 10 Praetorian guards drew their glowing greatswords, forming a defensive semicircle around the throne. They were terrified, but their loyalty to the Emperor was absolute. But adamantine doors, no matter how thick, mean absolutely nothing to the Shadow Sovereign. Skill activated, Shadow Step. The physical doors were not breached, they were not blown open. Instead, the shadows cast by the torches on the marble floor began to aggressively lengthen and twist. Right in the center of the throne room, the darkness bubbled upward like boiling tar. Kaelen Vane slowly rose from the shadows, stepping onto the polished marble floor as casually as if he were walking into his own living room. He wasn't accompanied by his 70,000 troops. He didn't bring the Colossus. He didn't even bring Vanguard. He came alone. "You locked the doors," Kaelen said, his voice calm, echoing off the golden pillars. He slowly tilted his head, looking directly at the Emperor. "That was incredibly rude, Aurelius." The Emperor stumbled backward, actually falling onto the steps of his throne. "Kill him!" he screamed, his voice cracking with sheer panic. "Kill him now!" The 10-level 85 Praetorian Guards roared in unison, activating their movement skills. They crossed the throne room in a microsecond, swinging their celestial greatswords from 10 different blind spots, aiming to instantly decapitate Kaelen before he could even summon a weapon. But Kaelen didn't move. He didn't blink, he just smiled. From the shadow directly beneath Kaelen's feet, 6 massive, razor-sharp tendrils shot outward at supersonic speed. Noctis, the Mythic-Tier Shadow Panther, didn't even fully materialize. Only its tendrils and its massive, crushing jaws emerged from the void. In less than 2 seconds, the throne room was painted red. The Praetorian Guards, the absolute strongest human knights on the entire continent, were systematically dismantled. One was bitten in half, his celestial armor completely ignoring the physical damage. 3 were impaled by the shadow tendrils and slammed violently into the golden pillars. The remaining 6 were decapitated so fast, their bodies took a full second to realize they were dead before collapsing to the floor. Kaelen didn't even look at the carnage. He just kept walking slowly toward the throne. "You relied on artificial angels and fancy armor," Kaelen noted, stepping over the bisected torso of a guard. "But you forgot one fundamental rule of this world, Aurelius. Fancy armor just makes you a slower target." The Emperor was hyperventilating. He pressed his back against his throne, his golden aura flickering erratically as his mana core destabilized from pure, unadulterated terror. He raised his hand, desperately trying to cast a high-tier holy spell. "I am the Supreme Holy Emperor," Aurelius screamed, tears streaming down his face. "I speak with the voice of the heavens. You cannot touch me. You are a heretic, a filthy, cursed mistake." Kaelen stopped at the bottom of the throne steps. He reached into his coat and slowly drew a single, forged iron dagger. It was the same cheap, basic dagger he had carried with him into the abyss. The blade was chipped, stained with the dried blood of thousands of monsters. "A mistake," Kaelen repeated softly. The blue fire in his eyes flared, casting long, demonic shadows across the golden walls. 10 years ago, my family was slaughtered in their beds. My father, a man who swore an oath of absolute loyalty to you, was burned alive. I was thrown into the abyss to rot. I spent 10 years fighting for my life in the dark, eating the raw meat of monsters just to survive. Kaelen took a step up the stairs. "I always thought it was Duke Valerius," Kaelen continued, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating with an ancient, terrifying rage. "I thought it was just a greedy, pathetic noble trying to steal our territory, but as I tore apart your crusade, as I extracted the souls of your paladins, I saw their memories, I saw the orders they received. It wasn't the Duke." Kaelen took another step. He was now towering over the pathetic, sniveling Emperor. "It was you." Emperor Aurelius realized he was going to die. The defensive spells weren't working, the guards were dead, the Seraphim were corrupted. In a desperate, pathetic attempt to justify his actions, the Emperor's mind completely snapped, and the darkest secret of the Arcanum Empire spilled from his lips. "I had to," the Emperor shrieked, pressing his hands against his face. "You don't understand. I was trying to save the world. I was trying to save my throne." Kaelen paused, his dagger hovering inches from the Emperor's throat. "Save the world from what?" "From you," Aurelius sobbed, spitting blood and saliva onto the pristine floor. "The Vane bloodline is cursed. Every 500 years, the curse awakens." The last time a Vane awakened this power, he nearly plunged the entire continent into eternal darkness. He was a monster, a genuine god of death. We lost millions of lives sealing him away. Kaelen's eyes widened slightly. This was lore he had never known. This was a secret his father had never told him. "I found the ancient texts," the Emperor continued, frantically trying to bargain for his life. "I realized the 500-year cycle was approaching. I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't let another Shadow Sovereign be born and take my throne. I ordered the purge. I told Valerius to kill every single person with a drop of Vane blood in their veins. I burned the children, I burned the women, I did it for the greater good. The silence in the throne room was deafening. Kaelen stood absolutely still. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His entire life's tragedy. The death of his loving mother, his honorable father, his siblings. The 10 years of agonizing, mind-breaking torture in the Abyssal Wilds. It wasn't a random tragedy. It wasn't a political dispute. It was manufactured by a cowardly, paranoid tyrant desperately clinging to a golden chair. And the supreme irony, the Emperor's attempt to stop the prophecy was the exact catalyst that fulfilled it. If Kaelen had been left alone, he might have lived a peaceful life. The trauma, the betrayal, the descent into the abyss, that was the crucible that forced his bloodline to awaken. Kaelen looked down at the Emperor. He didn't yell, he didn't scream. The sheer magnitude of his rage was far too deep, far too ancient for something as simple as raising his voice. Instead, Kaelen started to laugh. It was a dark, hollow, terrifying sound. It echoed off the golden pillars, vibrating with so much dense mana that the stained glass windows of the basilica began to shatter into a million pieces. "You slaughtered my entire family," Kaelen whispered, the laughter dying in his throat, replaced by a cold, merciless void. "Because you were afraid I would become a monster and take your throne." Kaelen reached out and grabbed the Emperor by his golden collar, lifting the grown man completely off the ground with one hand. The Emperor kicked and thrashed helplessly. "Well, Aurelius," Kaelen said, his eyes burning with a blinding, necrotic blue flame. "Congratulations, your prophecy came true." Kaelen didn't use his dagger, that would be too fast. That would be too merciful. System command initiated, soul rend. Kaelen plunged his bare left hand directly into the Emperor's chest. He didn't break the skin. He bypassed the physical body entirely and grabbed the Emperor's glowing, golden soul. Aurelius let out a scream that defied human vocal cords. It was the sound of absolute, unadulterated agony as Kaelen slowly, meticulously began to rip the Emperor's soul out of his physical vessel. The golden light of the Emperor's aura violently shifted, turning a bruised, sickening purple as Kaelen flooded the soul with abyssal magic. "You did this for a throne," Kaelen whispered directly into the Emperor's ear as he slowly pulled the soul free. "I don't want your throne, I don't want your corrupted, pathetic world. You can keep this golden cage." With a final, brutal yank, Kaelen ripped the Emperor's soul completely out of his body. The physical vessel of Aurelius instantly turned to ash, collapsing into a pile of gray dust on the throne. Kaelen held the glowing, screaming soul in his hand. He didn't extract it to make a soldier. He simply crushed it in his fist. Target slain. Supreme Holy Emperor Aurelius LV, 90 killed. Vengeance quest, the Emperor's folly complete. You have reached the absolute zenith of the human realm. Level up, level up, level up. Kaelen stood alone in the center of the ruined throne room. He looked at the golden chair, coated in the ash of the man who had ruined his life. The revenge was complete. The Holy Arcanum Empire was decapitated. There was no human left on the continent who could even scratch him. He had won. But as Kaelen looked out the shattered, stained glass windows, out at the blue sky above the city, he felt absolutely nothing for this world. This world was filled with cowards, traitors, and false gods. "Vanguard," Kaelen said softly to the empty room. "My liege, we are leaving," Kaelen commanded, turning his back on the golden throne. "Leaving, my liege, to where? The entire continent is yours. The humans are surrendering by the tens of thousands." Kaelen sheathed his forged iron dagger. "I don't want to rule humans, Vanguard. They are fragile, they are treacherous, they are boring." Kaelen raised his hand, channeling a massive amount of his newly acquired level 100 mana. He didn't just cast a spell. He ripped a literal hole in the fabric of reality. A massive, swirling portal of pitch-black, void energy opened in the center of the throne room. It didn't lead to another city. It led straight back down to the deepest, darkest pits of the underworld, a realm inhabited entirely by monsters, demons, and ancient horrors. "This world is too small for us," Kaelen whispered, stepping toward the portal. "Let's go find a real challenge." And that is the absolute, mind-blowing conclusion to Chapter 5. Kaelen has avenged his bloodline, executed the Emperor in the most brutal way possible, and has officially abandoned humanity to conquer the underworld. What do you do when you have conquered the world? The voice of the narrator is quiet now. The screaming, the holy magic, the clash of steel, it has all faded away. Most men would build a castle. They would sit on a golden throne, surround themselves with sycophants and guards, and spend the rest of their lives desperately trying to protect the power they had stolen. But Kaelen Vane was not most men. He had just executed the supreme holy emperor. He had decapitated the strongest empire on the continent. The golden throne of the basilica was empty, covered in the gray ash of a paranoid tyrant. For Kaelen, the human world had lost its appeal. It was a world built on fragile lies, governed by cowards who were terrified of prophecies, and defended by arrogant knights who thought a shiny breastplate made them invincible. Welcome back to Fate Library for the grand, epic finale of this massive saga. We have reached the end of the line for the Holy Arcanum Empire, but for Kaelen Vane, the real journey is just beginning. In the center of the ruined, shattered throne room, Kaelen stood before a massive, swirling portal of pitch-black void energy. It didn't look like a standard teleportation gate. It looked like a physical tear in the fabric of reality itself. The edges of the portal crackled with unstable red lightning, and a thick, suffocating smell of sulfur and ancient decay drifted out from the darkness. This was not a portal to another city. This was a direct, forced tear into the underworld, a dimension parallel to the Abyssal Wilds, but infinitely larger, infinitely older, and inhabited entirely by nightmare-tier monsters and demonic entities that humans only whispered about in terrifying myths. Kaelen didn't hesitate. He didn't look back at the golden pillars or the shattered stained glass windows of the basilica. He simply stepped forward, letting the pitch-black void completely swallow him whole. When Kaelen opened his eyes, he was no longer in the human realm. He was standing on the edge of a massive, jagged cliff made of dark red volcanic rock. The sky above was not blue, nor was it the bruised purple of his own mana. It was a chaotic, churning ocean of crimson and black clouds, continuously illuminated by massive forks of violent red lightning. There was no sun. The only light came from the sprawling, infinite oceans of boiling magma that carved through the valleys below. The air was so hot and thick with toxic mana that a normal human would have their lungs instantly liquefied just by taking a single breath. But Kaelen simply inhaled deeply, closing his eyes. "It smells like home," he whispered. The portal behind Kaelen did not close. In fact, it aggressively expanded, tearing the space even wider. The Shadow Sovereign was not entering the underworld alone. He was bringing his entire kingdom with him. The first to step through the portal was Warlord Vanguard. The massive, spiked Abyssal Knight slammed his armored boots onto the volcanic rock, his executioner's greatsword resting casually on his shoulder. He looked out over the infinite sea of magma, his glowing blue eyes narrowing in approval. "The ambient mana density here is adequate, my liege," Vanguard noted, his voice vibrating with destructive void energy. "It will serve as a suitable training ground for the infantry." Next came Inferno. The level 50 fire drake squeezed its massive skeletal frame through the portal, letting out an earth-shattering roar the moment it smelled the sulfur. It launched itself into the crimson sky, its necrotic blue fire heavily contrasting the red lightning of the underworld. Then, the ground began to shake. The 70-foot-tall abyssal colossus slowly stepped through the void tier, its massive obsidian body easily adapting to the extreme temperatures. The blue furnace in its chest flared brightly, absorbing the toxic ambient mana of the environment. But the most surreal sight was what followed. Hovering silently through the portal were the 6 fallen Seraphim. The Mythic-Tier artificial angels, once the absolute pinnacle of holy magic, were now completely corrupted. Their pitch-black platinum armor and jagged, shadow-woven wings looked terrifyingly majestic against the apocalyptic backdrop of the underworld. They were fallen angels in the truest sense, returning to hell not as prisoners, but as the elite commanders of the Shadow Sovereign. Behind them, the rest of the army poured in. 70,000 shadow soldiers, a mix of abyssal beasts, elite ironblood infantry, and the corrupted holy paladins, flooded the massive volcanic plateau. They stood in perfect, disciplined formation, an ocean of black armor and glowing blue eyes, waiting silently for Kaelen's next command. Kaelen walked to the very edge of the cliff, looking down at the sprawling, nightmarish landscape below. He had successfully invaded Hell, but Hell wasn't empty. System alert, extreme demonic energy detected. Warning, you have trespassed into the territory of the 7th Demon Lord Azazel. Quest generated, the throne of the underworld. Objective, establish dominance. Kaelen smirked, dismissing the blue system window with a flick of his wrist. Establish dominance, he repeated. The system finally understands my language. The ocean of magma in the valley below suddenly began to churn violently. Massive geysers of lava erupted hundreds of feet into the air. The volcanic rock of the cliff face trembled as a deafening, guttural roar echoed from the depths. From the boiling magma they emerged. It wasn't a small scouting party. It was a genuine demonic horde. Tens of thousands of lesser demons, grotesque, winged creatures with red skin, massive horns, and bodies built purely for violence, crawled out of the lava as if it were a warm bath. They were accompanied by massive, armored siege demons that carried weapons forged from black iron and hellfire. And at the very center of the horde, rising from a vortex of swirling magma, was the ruler of this territory. It was Azazel, the 7th Demon Lord. He was a towering, 20-foot-tall monstrosity, clad in armor made of screaming, petrified souls. He possessed 4 arms, each holding a massive, jagged scimitar that dripped with corrosive acid. His eyes were burning pits of yellow fire. Entity name, Archdemon Lord Azazel LV, 95, danger level, cataclysmic. Azazel floated upward, stopping in midair so he was perfectly level with the cliff where Kaelen stood. The Demon Lord looked at Kaelen, his yellow eyes narrowing in sheer confusion and absolute arrogance. He saw a human, a tiny, fragile human wearing a tattered black coat. He saw the shadow army behind Kaelen, but Azazel's demonic pride refused to acknowledge their threat. To a demon lord, everything that wasn't a demon was just food. A mortal, Azazel's voice boomed, sounding like 2 tectonic plates grinding together. A mortal human has somehow stumbled into my domain, and you brought toys made of shadows. Azazel began to laugh. It was a horrifying, grating sound that caused the lesser demons in the valley below to laugh along with him, a chorus of tens of thousands of screeching monsters. I have not tasted human flesh in 3 millennia, Azazel mocked, pointing one of his massive scimitars at Kaelen. Your soul will burn in my forge for eternity, little human. Surrender now, and I may only torture you for a century. Kaelen didn't move. He didn't draw his bow. He didn't summon his forged iron daggers. He didn't even order his army to attack. He just looked at the massive, level 95 Demon Lord with a look of absolute soul-crushing boredom. You talk too much, Kaelen said softly. His voice wasn't amplified, but in the sudden, eerie silence that fell over the cliff, every single demon heard him perfectly. Kaelen slowly pulled his hands out of his pockets. You think this is your domain? Kaelen whispered, the blue fire in his eyes suddenly flaring so intensely it actually illuminated the volcanic ash falling around them. Skill activated, Domain of the Underworld Mythic Grade. Using the domain of the underworld inside the actual underworld created a catastrophic, localized paradox of mana. Kaelen wasn't just summoning a pocket reality anymore. He was forcibly overriding the dimensional laws of the demonic realm and replacing them with his own absolute authority. The red lightning in the sky was instantly snuffed out, replaced by a suffocating, pitch-black void. The boiling magma in the valleys instantly froze solid, turning into jagged, black obsidian. The temperature dropped from thousands of degrees to absolute 0 in a fraction of a second. The 70,000 lesser demons in the valley, who had been laughing just seconds ago, suddenly began to scream in unimaginable agony. Domain override successful. All enemies suffer, minus 70% movement speed, continuous necrotic decay, and absolute terror. Because the demons were creatures of fire and chaos, the freezing, necrotic decay of Kaelen's domain was absolute poison to them. Thousands of lesser demons instantly began to disintegrate, their bodies crumbling into black ash before they could even draw their weapons. Up in the air, Archdemon Lord Azazel stopped laughing. His 4 massive scimitars grew incredibly heavy. The gravity around him seemed to multiply by a factor of 10. He tried to flap his leathery wings, but the air was so thick with Kaelen's localized mana that it felt like trying to swim through wet concrete. What is this?" Azazel roared, his voice cracking with genuine panic. He flared his demonic aura, trying to push back against the crushing weight of the domain, but it was completely useless. His level 95 stats were being forcibly suppressed by a power that defied all logic. Kaelen slowly walked to the absolute edge of the cliff. He looked down at the struggling demon lord. "Kneel," Kaelen commanded. He didn't use a spell, he just spoke the word. But the command carried the full, unadulterated weight of a Mythic-Tier Sovereign. Azazel screamed, his massive muscles bulging as he tried to resist. But the gravitational pressure of the domain, combined with the psychological horror of the absolute terror debuff, was too much. The Archdemon Lord's wings snapped under the pressure. He plummeted from the sky, crashing onto the newly formed obsidian ground in the valley below with a bone-shattering thud. Azazel tried to stand back up, but the pressure forced him down. Slowly, agonizingly, the 20-foot-tall, level 95 Demon Lord was forced onto his hands and knees. He looked up at the cliff, staring at the tiny human in the black coat. For the first time in 3,000 years, Azazel felt fear. He wasn't looking at a human, he was looking at an apex predator. Kaelen simply raised his hand. From the shadows behind him, the 6 fallen Seraphim shot into the sky like black missiles. They dove down into the valley at supersonic speed, their jagged shadow wings leaving trails of blue fire. They didn't even use weapons. They hit Azazel with raw, physical kinetic energy. The impact was devastating. The 6 Mythic-Tier angels pinned the Demon Lord to the ground, their armored boots completely shattering his defensive aura. Azazel roared in pain, but before he could swing his scimitars, Vanguard teleported directly onto his chest. The Abyssal Warlord raised his massive, void-infused executioner's greatsword high into the air. "The Sovereign demands silence," Vanguard rumbled. Vanguard brought the greatsword down, effortlessly decapitating the Archdemon Lord in a single strike. The valley went dead silent. The remaining demons, the tens of thousands who had survived the initial shockwave of the domain, dropped their weapons. They fell to their knees on the freezing obsidian, trembling uncontrollably. They had just watched their invincible lord get executed in less than a minute by a human who hadn't even drawn a weapon. Target slain, Archdemon Lord Azazel LV, 95 killed. Territory conquered, the 7th circle of the underworld. Quest complete, the throne of the underworld. New title acquired, Supreme Sovereign of the Underworld. Kaelen read the blue system prompts. He didn't smile, he just let out a slow, tired sigh. He had avenged his family, he had crushed the Emperor, he had conquered the Bastion of Light, and now he had just effortlessly claimed his first territory in the underworld. He looked out over the infinite, dark horizon of his new realm. The underworld was massive. There were 6 other demon lords out there. There were ancient gods, slumbering horrors, and infinite dungeons to conquer. "Vanguard," Kaelen said softly. The warlord teleported back to the cliff, kneeling before him. "Yes, my sovereign." "Extract him," Kaelen ordered, pointing down at the decapitated body of Azazel. "And then tell the army to prepare to march. We have an entire dimension to conquer." And that is the absolute end of this legendary journey. Kaelen Vane, the boy who was thrown away to die in the dark, has officially conquered both the human realm and the underworld. He went from being a betrayed, broken victim to the supreme sovereign of the dead. This has been one of the most insane, massive, and satisfying progression stories we have ever covered on this channel. The sheer scale of the revenge, the mind-blowing lore of the 500-year prophecy, and the epic Mythic-Tier evolutions made this an absolute masterpiece. If you loved this 1.3-hour epic, you know what to do. But more importantly, if you want to see where Kaelen started, or if you missed any of the crucial lore leading up to this massive finale, you absolutely have to go check out the previous videos on the channel. We have the entire backstory, the original betrayal, and his agonizing climb out of the Abyssal Wilds fully documented and ready for you to binge right now. Go click on the channel page, find the Part 1 video, and experience the full journey of the Shadow Sovereign from the very beginning. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me through this massive epic. You guys are the absolute best. Stay safe, keep leveling up, and I will see you in the next story.